Going back to New Orleans, one of the wins we got was that the levees that famously failed during Katrina did, in fact, work this time. And while that's really good news and saved a lot of lives, it's also a really good microcosm of the largest systemic issue, which is America only waiting for things to go horribly wrong before actually fixing it. We fix bridges after they collapse. Flint's water pipes get replaced, while ignoring all of the other cities with potential contamination. On a larger scale of this, we look at something like the ozone layer. The good news, and it is good news, is that the hole over Antarctica we used to worry about is actually repairing. Even better news is that it's being repaired because of our efforts to cut down on the chemicals that were damaging it. We saw a problem that sure seemed irreversible, took actual steps to solve the problem, and now the problem is actually being solved. We have that potential to fix things, but what we need to start doing, and we being the people making this infrastructure bill, is getting ahead of this. Regular maintenance, the country equivalent of brushing our teeth. So what should we be doing? Well, we should all be brushing our teeth, that's for sure. Cavities do not around. But also, the folks at Oxfam International have pointed out that it's not enough for governments to accelerate use of renewable energies, but also reduce overall energy demand, aiming for net zero emissions, as in trying to take away more carbon in the atmosphere than we're putting out, is impossible if we're just trying to offset the current emissions. And instead, we have to focus on actual reduction, and that means ending subsidies to fossil fuel industries, forcing banks to switch investments over from fossil fuels to more sustainable energy sources like wind and solar, or taxing carbon emissions and then funneling that money to vulnerable communities that are being directly impacted by climate change. It seems very obvious, except for the part where we're not doing it. Renewables make up only about 20% of the US power mix today, and we could be doing a lot better. As of September 2020, 452 cities and 22 regions across the US have committed to hitting net zero carbon emissions by 2050, and some are moving even faster than that. Burlington, Vermont is on track to become a net zero city by 2030, and they were the first US city to run entirely on renewable electricity back in 2014. This was done largely through incentives like rebates for residents who install energy-efficient heat pumps, but there were also some mandates, like an impact fee assigned to any home or building that still relies on fossil fuel for heat. But these steps were only possible because the city owns the power utility. So it's not just bluster when politicians set new metrics. Many cities get their power from investor-owned utilities, requiring a constant negotiation. These are just some of the complexities that someone is going to need to untangle. Someone being the people who are in power and can actually implement these sweeping changes. Yes, and will. But let's say, hypothetically, that our government is jam-packed with a horde of bumbling clownwads who seem more concerned with squabbling about cancel culture and removing women's healthcare rights than thinking about fundamental preparation for and prevention of climate change. Hypothetically, let's say the people in power fail us. It's one of the most nihilist aspects of this conversation, the feeling that we, the individual, can only sit back and watch in horror as this stuff goes down. But that's not quite true. And in fact, our individual actions can make a substantial difference in combating climate change. And no, not by switching our straw preference, but by something called community resilience. In short, the phrase is exactly what it sounds like. Communities that have established immediate resources and plans for when an economic or societal or climate disaster affects them. Not only does such a system respond faster, but they're generally more trusted and can easily connect with government aid down the road. In Haiti, for example, after the 2010 earthquake, FEMA found that a series of pre-existing social groups within neighborhoods not only had a built-in system of volunteers and resources, but were far more accepted than outside humanitarian efforts. And most of the failures in that case didn't come from supply shortages or slow response, but rather government efforts to connect with those communities. Overall, they determined that the effectiveness of those local helpers came from the fact that they were well established in their communities and therefore more immediately visible to residents, and most importantly, understood the specific needs of that area. To put it really simply, talk to your neighbors. Don't snitch on them, talk to them. Because if a hurricane or snowstorm comes or the moon crashes into Earth in a really awesome and believable way, they are the people you will be relying on. You know, look for the helpers, etc. See if your neighborhood has a pre-existing organization for this, and if they don't, perhaps see about starting one. Many of you watching no doubt have mixed feelings about your community. Perhaps there's a large presence of Trump flags, or meth labs, or Trumpy meth labs, or God forbid you live near a performance arts college. And you look at the stories of Katrina and all the looting, or you just read Lord of the Flies, or for some reason are continuing to watch The Walking Dead, and it feels like humanity is destined to eat each other alive. Well, the good news there is that nearly all of that is bullshit. The good news is that disasters are nonpartisan and often cause people to come together. And that looting in Katrina the media was so concerned about, well, it turns out that we've since had multiple studies and examinations showing that it didn't really happen like that. And in fact, the fear of looting resulted in a worse situation than the actual looting. And what was perceived as looting at the time was actually people in the community gathering supplies. And if you've ever been in a nor'easter or hurricane or any kind of crisis, you probably already know that. That the cold hard truth is that when things get bad, humanity doesn't naturally resort to eating each other. If that were true, we wouldn't have made it this far. Maybe the rich. We'll probably eat the rich, alright? But that's not because they're rich so much as they'll be the people hoarding the resources. And so we'll have to, go get their resources like we're Bilbo Baggins fighting Smaug. And then, like Smaug, if they fight back and we have to defeat them, it's like, well, look at all this free dragon meat. It would be a shame to let all this dragon meat go to waste. Let's eat the dragon meat. The point is that we'll be okay-ish. And that's better than really bad. And there's hope and junk. Do we have a clip of hope and junk? Yeah. Hey, thanks for watching that clip. Here's the evergreen end plate to ask you to like and subscribe. It's any day of the year where you are.